Welcome to round 6 of the AFL footy season, and what a massive week it's been for the Brisbane Lions already. We've had suspensions overturned, we've had players become injured, we've had players become available coming back from injury, and a little bit of controversy here and there with the media, and we will talk about all of that when special guest Neil Butler joins me. So hit that intro music now. Unfortunately, Al's unable to join us on the podcast tonight as he has some family things to attend to. However, we have a special guest, Neil Butler, who's known to many Lions fans, who was coming on just as a guest for an interview but is now stepping into the co-host chair for tonight. So welcome, Neil.
Thanks, Ash. That's a big intro. I saw my first game at the Brunswick Street Oval, would you believe? I believe in 1964. My parents used to live not very far from the ground, and I used to get taken down at three-quarter time and passed through the gates when you were allowed to do that at three-quarter time. And subsequently, I've been to every ground that Fitzroy / Brisbane / the Bears have called home and seen a game of footy.
Well, there you go. You've definitely got me covered there. I was still about 11 years away when you went to your first Fitzroy game. So
was I. Don't worry about that. Well, it's interesting because, a lot of people say, why did you choose to barrack for Fitzroy? And my grandfather on my father's side was born in Alfred Crescent in North Fitzroy, which when you walk out the front door of that house, there's a ground over the road called Brunswick Street. And my other grandfather lived in Swan Hill until he was 22 and jumped on his motorcycle on the morning of the 1922 grand final, rode down from Swan Hill to Melbourne, saw the grand final and said he would barrack for the team that won the grand final. Thankfully, the Lions got up by 5 points over Collingwood. Otherwise, my life may have turned out very, very differently.
There you go. My maternal family has a pretty similar story with my great-grandfather came down from, would have been Euroa at the time, and same year. Pretty much the same scenario, and his son, my grandfather, became a diehard Fitzroy man. So I ended up having Fitzroy on both sides of my family as well. So,
yeah, well, mum and dad, as teenagers, went to see the 1944 grand final separately. They weren't together at that stage. I think one was 14 and one was 12 or something. And I saw the last Fitzroy premiership, which was in 1989 when the reserves got up and beat Geelong by half a dozen points, I think, something like that.
And Snowy Lupson and Doc Wielden might have thrown a few cut lunches here and there.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yes.
Yeah, always throw that on the end of your any accusation you make, mate. You'll be right.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, I guess tell us a little bit about your more recent history with the Brisbane Lions as it is now.
Well, I just taking it back slightly to 1983, my current membership started in 1983. When I was 21-year-old. In fact, my maternal grandfather bought me that membership. And every year since then, I've been a member. So I was at 42, 43 seasons in a row that I've been. So as you can imagine, I've been through the absolute lows and the absolute highs during that period of time. I was a foundation member of the Lions, obviously, in 1997. And as a result of that, I'm one of I don't know how many people who've been a member of the Brisbane Lions every year that they've been in existence, which is pretty handy. There was never any doubt that I would jump on board because I went to the merger meeting at Dallas Brooks Hall and Kevin Murray got up and said, I'm behind this. So if it was all right for him, it was all right for me.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing for me. I didn't go to that meeting, but I heard Kevin Murray and Jim Keys from the Masters Apprentices, probably a band you would know.
I have interviewed the great man.
No
longer with us.
I heard them both on Triple M radio. It would have been the next day, I'm guessing. And Kevin Murray was up and about. No, I'm getting behind the new merged club, and Jim Keys already had a song organised, a new version of the theme song. And Masters Apprentices were a band that my dad was hugely into And I grew up having to listen to them, and obviously grew to like them, and knew who Jim Keys was. So
Yes. So
yes,
Jimmy sadly passed away about 10 years ago. I had the good fortune to interview him. The one interview that I've done with someone like that I can't find a copy of, I'm determined to find it somewhere. But he also wrote the alternate words to the Melbourne Victory song, the one that goes to Scotland the Brave, because both songs, Glenn Wheatley had a bit of a hand in as well, and he was obviously a member of the Masters as well.
and a Fitzroy supporter as well.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's been a long-term investment, I guess, of emotion. I can remember 1978 was the first year in my life that we won anything apart from a raffle, and we won the night premiership that year, and also we made the finals for the first time in 1979. I remember that really clearly. Yeah, so there's been lots of really exciting times, and of course, then going through the process of watching Fitzroy slowly disappearing into the sunset was pretty sad.
Yeah, so I've got a little Fitzroy thing I do. I've only done a couple of episodes so far, so I may get you on because I'm going to do something about the merger. I may get you on to have a chat about that at the
Sure.
time as well, because I'm going to try and get some people from all sides, the lovers, the haters, the up yours Ross Oakley people, and maybe even a couple of North Melbourne people. I've got a couple of cousins on that side of the fence, unfortunately. Can't help bad luck and can't pick your relatives, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, interestingly, I can remember when the conversation was turning to Fitzroy merging with North Melbourne and being the cleverly named North Fitzroy Kangaroos or something, which meant the name Fitzroy might have lasted for 15 minutes in my mind. But when in my generation, which is slightly before yours, I guess, by one generation, let's call it, we were brought up to hate other clubs, and so for me to follow a Melbourne-based club that wasn't Fitzroy just wasn't going to work. So I'd made the decision that I was going to follow an interstate club once the merger took place. And the club that I'd selected was the only one in the AFL that had maroon on their jumper. They were called the Brisbane Bears. So I can remember getting a phone call one Thursday night from my mum saying, you know how you're going to follow the Brisbane Bears? They're not going to be the Brisbane Bears for very long. And a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah, well, like for me, I grew up in Western Australia. I'm a Victorian by birth. That's my dirty little secret. Not many people know that.
You're relatively normal, though. That's the interesting thing.
Yeah, so I grew up in country, Western Australia, lived in Darwin for a bit, but I was just about to start high school when the West Coast Eagles came along. And I'd grown up all my childhood watching waffle football on TV. We got the winners on every Saturday night with Drew Morfitt, and we got about 10 minutes of VFL football from the winners, and very occasionally saw Fitzroy, but mostly Hawthorn and Essendon and Carlton. But yeah, 1986, we finally got the VFL finals. So Fitzroy did pretty well that year. I was wrapped. But then, of course, the West Coast Eagles come along, and that's all we got. And I had to go to some games of VFL football. So I went and watched the Eagles with my mates who all jumped on board and had a bit of a fondness for them, obviously, because I grew up watching a lot of their guys play for South Freo and East Perth, and being an East Perth boy myself, and Subiaco and so forth. So, yeah, I had a bit of a fondness for them as a second team, and I nearly jumped on them. Had Fitzroy, like you, had they gone with another Melbourne club, I couldn't have followed them. And that kills me inside to think that I could have walked away from the club that both sides of my family support. But I would have probably jumped on with the Eagles, but it wouldn't have been the same.
No, and I think there's a lot of people out there who have chosen the North Melbourne option or other Melbourne-based sides, and I'm sure they love their club, but not as much as they would, given that, when you were allocated a club at birth, that's the birthright. It's the birthmark, and you really can't do much about it. I was also fortunate that I grew up in the suburbs, a suburb called East Doncaster in Melbourne, and that was absolutely smack bang in the middle of Fitzroy's recruitment zone in those days.
Yes.
And the school I went to was a school called Beverly Hills Primary School. Now, there's only two things in the world called Beverly Hills, spelt the correct way with an L-E-Y, not the American version or the Sydney version. That is the Beverly Hills Primary School and the Beverly Hills Junior Football Club. That
home of Paul Roos.
Paul Roos played there. I went to school and played footy with Paul. Michael Poynton before him, Chris Smith before him. There were a number of Fitzroy players came through that school and that club. and subsequently, Mark Murphy and Christian Petrarca and Christian Jacks and a number of other kids have gone through that club at various times. But back in my day, when the Fitzroy players came out to do the clinic, there was about 1 million Collingwood, Carlton, Essendon, and Hawthorn jumpers in my year level, but only one Fitzroy. So when Norm Dare came out or Paul Shanahan came out, they were the two I remember. I was always one dragged out the front to do the clinic with them.
Nice.
Yeah.
We unfortunately never got anything like that. I had my year 7 teacher played for the Eagles and later Richmond, but at the time he played for Subiaco. So that was the closest I got to having any Lions connection in my school days.
Yeah. So you were far away from the recruiting zone, weren't you?
Yeah, just slightly, like a little bit west of the Wimmera. And
yeah, very, very much west. Yes, that's very West Wimmera, isn't it?
Yes, but like I do have we on my dad's side, we have a very big family connection to the area around Bordertown, Nell, Conniva, where a lot of Essendon players were recruited from relatives. And one by the name of Roger Merritt, who's a relative of ours, actually ended up at the Brisbane Bears.
Okay.
As we know. So I guess we had a bit of a family connection to the Bears. And growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, we always got to watch the Bears play on TV on every second Sunday afternoon. It was either them or the Swans. So
that's part of the reason I went with the Brisbane Bears as well, because I was going to go with Brisbane Bears because you could actually get to see them on the TV.
Yeah, well, that's right. And then I guess once they became really good, we got to see them every Saturday night, especially when Channel 10 came along.
That's it.
And we had some decent commentators commentating the games back then too.
Back in the days when they recognised there were teams outside of Victoria.
Yeah. Well, that's there's some very interesting times at the moment. All right. Well, so what we'll do, we'll get into the team, I guess.
Sure.
Or actually, before that, I will talk about the tribunal. So I'm just going to give a bit of a quick rundown of what took place at the tribunal the other night, and then I'll ask for your thoughts at the end of it. So, Charlie Cameron was given a week off for his tackle on Jake Lever. And I don't know why, but the media kept referring to him as former teammate Jake Lever. It's been
they played together at Adelaide.
Yeah, but it's been about 7 or 8 years since they were teammates. So,
like my grandfather saw them play together, I think.
Yeah, well, pretty sure my great-grandfather did as well. But so basically, the reason they went to the tribunal was to hope to take it down from medium to low impact. Adrian Anderson, or Lionel Hutz, as I like to call him.
I'm the law-talking guy.
Was our representation for Charlie, and he got Charlie to give a bit of evidence and basically saying that he was a bit smaller than Jake Lever, so how could he really have hurt him? Along those lines, had Eddie Betts and an Indigenous elder, Gregory Eggett, I hope I'm saying that right, give a bit of character evidence. They referred to his exemplary record of never being suspended in 200 games. And Adrian Anderson referred to, and this is where it gets a bit interesting, he referred to previous examples of low-impact dangerous tackles this year. Matthew Johnson on Josh Dunkley, Toby Nankervis on Ivan Soldo, which was an interesting one. Two dinosaurs. And Jordan Dawson on Lockie O'Brien. And now I will come back to that one. And they basically ended up with not being suspended, and they were classed as low. Sally Flynn, the AFL representative, argued that it was a medium impact and it could have caused a concussive injury or severe neck injury. She pointed out that she was aware that Lever had one arm free, but not adequately enough to prevent him from hitting his head on the ground, which, as I think everybody knows, he did that himself to try and get a free kick. The angle and the rotation of the tackle, it wasn't an attempt to slow down momentum from that. And the extent of the force of the tackle was, she argued, excessive. Now, the Lions brought up 6 points. That's Lionel Hutz, who was Andrew Demetrio's former right-hand man back in the days of when he ran the AFL.
And I think he invented the MRO concept rather than go to the tribunal every week.
I believe so. And he did try the point system back in the day too. I'm pretty sure he invented that, which that did not work. So his 6 points were that the medical report was clear. Lever had a left arm completely free and used it to brace himself, or I guess that's what he meant. His right arm was only partially pinned and he could move the bottom half of it. The head movement of Lever was him hitting the ground and looking at the umpire to get a free kick. It brought up the Cameron's a lot smaller than Lever, and then the 3 low impact examples. And interestingly, he referred to the Macquarie Dictionary. He explained the definition of exemplary, saying that Cameron is one of 355 players ever to have played 200 games and never been suspended out of a total of 13,125 players. I mean, that takes a bit of research, I think.
Mm.
And it was then brought up that the tackle of Jordan Dawson on Lockie O'Brien that he used it as an example was, in fact, false, because Lockie O'Brien was delisted by Carlton last year, wasn't playing, and it was, in fact, Ollie Holland. So that was a bit of a red flag for me, and that's I did message Al and say he's not getting off after that example was used, and found it to be wrong. And then, before the tribunal even started to deliberate, he asked to be excused.
And so, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I rest my case.
Mr. Hutt, do you know you're not wearing any pants?
What? Ah!
And not even be present because he had another appearance with the Suns at the VFL tribunal.
Yeah.
So that's where Al and I got on the messages to each other and said, well, yeah, he's not playing this week. Let's start thinking about who's coming in for him. And then probably about 25 minutes later, after the tribunal deliberated for a long time, suddenly it was downgraded to a fine. And here we are. So what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I made a post on Instagram the other day, which has subsequently had almost, I think, exactly 300 likes, which is so unusual on an Instagram post. You know, you normally get 10 if you're lucky.
Yeah.
The comment I made was the good bloke defence is absurd. I mean, when does someone just is it 200 games? Is it 180 games? What is it? So where does that threshold come in? The fact of the matter was it shouldn't have been a suspension in the first place, in my mind.
Yeah,
now,
correct.
I have a slightly different capacity to see things to supporters of other clubs, obviously, but I reckon that the fact that his head would not have hit the ground unless he had thrown his head to do it meant that it couldn't possibly be anything more than low impact. I also think that the arm being free, there had been precedents for that as well. I think, yeah, okay, it was borderline, but I think will we or won't we, okay, he hasn't been suspended, so we won't, might have been the tipping point. But if you look at posts by, I'm not going to name names, but let's say Fox Footy, for example, and John Ralph from the Herald Sun.
Oh, I'm going to launch on Fox Footy really soon, actually.
It's as though he had been out and, had robbed 1,000 banks of all the money in Australia. And then they'd said, well, he's a good bloke, so he doesn't go to jail. I mean, it was, if anything, it might have been the tipping point on a 50-50. But to suggest that he got off because he's a good bloke, well, you and I would never get suspended, would we?
Oh, I probably would, but but the other thing was too, like, a lot of people making reference to, well, there's rules for white people and rules for
that's just
for non-white people, and the fact that all the media outlets in the AFL left them on their comment sections really, really pissed me off. I mean, that's not even something you should be talking about. It's not true. It's just people clutching at straws. And yeah, so something was pointed out in a I can't remember because I'm not really active in many of the Facebook groups, but there was one thing pointed out where in one day there were 8 posts by Fox Footy about that exact so-called good bloke defence. Now, I'm going to come off the long run a little bit here, not quite Malcolm Marshall or Michael Holding style, but somewhat. So I wasn't going to name names, and I probably shouldn't, but their initials are Ben Waterworth, Fox Footy, social media manager and producer and writer of AFL 360 and other shows and sometimes commentator. Marnie Vinyl of the age, and I love Marnie. She's great. She's really good for football and has a lot of good things to say. And the aforementioned John Ralph. They went on a witch hunt. They brought false information to the party. They've obviously got a bee in their bonnet about Brisbane or about Charlie Cameron or whatever. In fact, I'm going to say it's a bee in their bonnet about Brisbane at the moment. The whole thing with Noah Answorth was blown way out of proportion and given way too much airtime. It was a nothing incident. This Charlie Cameron situation at the tribunal, again, they just tried to crucify him before, after, and during. The commentators during the game all agreed that there wasn't really a lot in it.
Mm.
And even Brian Taylor, who's generally considered to be pretty biased against non-Victorian teams by a lot of people, again, he was, well, there's not a lot in it sort of thing. So I don't know what the story is. As I said in last week's game wrap, the media hadn't really been giving us much of a run as far as, I guess, other than saying, well, they're a good team or they're not playing well. They are playing well. They've won this game. They've lost that game. Suddenly in the last 2 weeks, and whether it's a coincidence since Melbourne's drug scandal hit the airwaves or not, suddenly we've been the flavour of the month, and there's a lot of muckraking and a lot of crap going on. And like Noah Answorth had his character assassinated a fair bit, and anyone who's ever met Noah Answorth knows that he wouldn't say boo to anybody unless he was provoked or unless you had a good reason.
Or maybe boo-hoo instead of boo.
Yeah, like he's just one of those guys. He is one of the absolute gentlemen of the football fraternity. And look, I've had my differences with his football at times, but as a person, I could never fault his character. So that really got in my craw, the way they assassinated him. And I had a bit to say about it, so I won't say too much more. 1 or 2 posts about the incident is okay, but 8 in one day is excessive, and I'm sure he knows that he's gone too far.
I think the other thing that we haven't spoken about, and I haven't had a chance to go back and listen to the episodes subsequent to this event, but I reckon when Brisbane called out, well, can I use the word absolute crap on this podcast? I won't.
Yeah.
No, use absolute crap.
Yeah, we just don't drop F-bombs or C-bombs.
Yeah, the absolute crap that was written about the alleged Las Vegas trip that actually was in Los Angeles, with the only compromising photo I've seen with being Huey McCluggage wearing a really bad cowboy hat.
That was brought up in previous episodes.
when the Lions said, right, that's it, we're not going to talk to you guys anymore. If you're making up stories, keep making them up. I reckon that has played into the game as well. And so I think we are a little bit, as a club, in the bad books with the media, and any opportunity, any sniff of anything, they will no doubt have a crack at.
Yeah, the fact that they thought they had a story that came from a footy forum on the internet was leaked by somebody with a connection to the Melbourne Football Club. Everybody knows that now. It's a bit of a coincidence that stories were leaked about a couple of the non-Victorian clubs, Sydney, Brisbane, and I think Adelaide at that time. Yeah, just like the media have got a bit of a bee in their bonnet, because what they thought was the story of the year turned out to be nothing.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, the man who has been the alleged source of this story and the alleged journalism that was associated with it still has a program on Melbourne's highest rating radio station. So I'm not exactly sure how that works. But anyway, be that as it may.
Yeah.
And I must just pick you up too on the fact that you said you were coming in off the long run. Can I do a shameless plug for a radio program that happens on a Saturday morning called the Two Blokes Chatting Radio Show, on which there is a segment called The Long Run, on which you may find a voice that sounds a little bit familiar after this much of this episode. And it may have got a run on the long run. So
go for it. Have you got a website or social media pages that you can plug?
2bc.radio is the radio is the program website, and just look for Two Blokes Chatting. But there is a podcast called The Long Run, and it's me having a crack for 5 or 6 minutes every week. So you can check that out as well.
Yeah, I probably went a bit soft tonight, to be honest, because I went a bit harder previously. But yeah, no, like I actually pinched that from when Rodney Hogg used to be on SEN.
Yep. Oh, we've all had a crack at that one, but we've actually got a regular segment that is introduced by a song by the Eagles, and you could probably guess which song it is.
Yeah, I reckon it's tough choice, but yeah, I can narrow it down to one.
Hotel California. No, it's not.
No, that's the only one most people know, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, well, if radio in this country is to be believed. Anyway, I actually have listened to Two Blokes Chatting, probably not often enough, but being a single parent, life gets in the way sometimes. But I have listened to a couple of times, and you did interview a good friend of mine from Corio Football Club, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, about the junior program, junior football program. So, that was the first time I listened. I've listened a couple of times since then, and you do a great job. That's one of the reasons I got you on.
And for those who've if they ever get to see a photo, they'll understand why it's podcasts and radio and not television.
Well, when I was doing my my Bachelor of Communications, one of my teachers said I had a good head for radio and a good voice for the print media. And I was recently described by a listener as the Kelly Underwood of the podcasting world. And Al was given the Dennis Cometti title, so I'm not sure. Maybe you're probably more a Peter Landy. I think there's a throwback to a great commentator from years gone by.
From whence he came.
Yeah.
Each of two.
Oh, look, they were great days. Sandy Roberts, Peter Landy, Bruce McAvaney before he became what he eventually became, and Peter McKenna. Bernie Quinlan used to be on.
Yes, he was very good, the big boy Bernie.
And Don Scott before he became an idiot.
Allegedly. Yes, I tell you who I did see the other day in the street, walking the other way. If I had more chance, I would have stopped and said g'day. Mickey Conlon.
Oh, yeah.
I could happily turn for Mickey. He was he could still go out and kick a football. Now he's got to be 65, I guess.
Yeah, so he would have. I think he went to the club in 77, 78.
Yeah, his last game,
and he would have been about
grand final, reserves grand final.
Yeah, he would have been about 21, 22 when he went to the club. So I went to a night at the Historical Society. They had Doc Wheeldon and Mickey Conlon on the same night. And I remember him saying he'd played a bit of footy prior to coming to Fitzroy. So, he'd have to be sort of in his 60s by now. But even that night, and that would have been back in 2018, I reckon, I said to him the same thing. I went up and it was a bit of a blubbering mess. You know, you were my dad's favourite player, and you and Bernie Quinlan were my first favourite players when I was really little. And he sort of put his arm around me for a photo and whatever to show my dad. And then like he's put his arm around me and I've gone, mate, you are ripped. Your arm is rock hard. You should still be playing footy now. And he just laughed.
Well, of course, Doc Wheeldon and Mickey Conlon have got something very much in common.
Wore the same number.
They did indeed, along with Matty Primus.
Yes. And, in later years after the merger, someone else wore that number who was pretty good too.
Won a Brownlow medal, as I recall.
Yes, and was an All-Australian back pocket, wingman, half-back and half-forward.
That's him.
And he never gets brought up in that conversation with Adam Goods and Matthew Pavlich as a multi-position All-Australian player, but he also won a best and fairest as a back pocket too.
Yep.
And for those playing at home who can't quite follow, it's Jason Ackermanis.
Yes, I have a number 12 jumper in my cupboard, which is a Fitzroy jumper. I think I got it for the Doc. I think it was post Mickey Conlon. Mickey Conlon, he's our man. If he can't do it, no one can. Was the chant behind the goals at the southern end of the Junction Oval.
Yeah, back when the cheer squads were probably a little bit more colourful than what they are these days. Well, I sit with the cheer squad when I can get to games in Victoria, and we're a little bit restricted with some of the things we can and can't say. We do love a good tangent on this podcast too. We caught up and have to cut stuff out, and we make little shorts on YouTube. We recently had a bit of a discussion about O.J. Simpson and the Naked Gun movies, which has become quite popular on our YouTube channel. Surprisingly, I'd never thought that would be something people would want to listen to or watch. But yeah, so tangents, not a problem here.
Excellent.
That's part of what we do. I think our very first episode Al and I did was meant to go for 10 minutes. It went for well over an hour.
Yeah, only way to be.
Yeah, so I guess, all right, well, we'll get to selections. So
Yep.
earlier in the week, there was an announcement that Zach Bailey's going to miss about 4 to 6 weeks with an injury.
Mhm.
We obviously didn't know what was going to happen with Charlie Cameron. We now know that he's playing, and we were also told that Connor McKenna's available. So I floated the idea that maybe McKenna comes in, Zorko goes back down to the forward line. Didn't get received too well. I was going to read out some of the comments in the comment section, but I'll keep that for another time. I'll just basically the gist was that most people disagreed with me, as they often do, and felt with good reason. Like Zorko's been playing brilliantly down at half back. He's probably leading our best and fairest, in my opinion, at the moment. If not, he'd be in the top 2 or 3. And as was pointed out to me from Supercoach and fantasy football players, that he's scoring a hell of a lot of points for them. So, yeah, fair enough. Now, the player everybody suggested would probably come in for Bailey is not the guy that came in. The suggestion was Devon Robertson.
Mm-hmm.
Or we bring Jimmy Tunstall into the lineup and Cal Archie takes over from Bailey, which I don't hate that idea at all. But the change we got was Jared Lyons coming in for Bailey. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it doesn't surprise me because I did read that. I always make sure to read the VFL report, and apparently he was pretty good last week. My gut feel says that Lyons will be the sub and that James Tunstall will come in to replace Bailey. So I think Jimmy Tunstall last week didn't get a look in at all, despite being the sub. And I think the week before he might have been the sub and got 10 minutes. So I think they gave him a full game. He's a similar type to Bailey in so much as he covers the ground pretty quickly. You couldn't say that Zach Bailey being replaced by Jared Lyons is a like for like. So I think they'll put Lyons as the sub. He can play forward. He can play midfield if, depending upon who is subbed out. I think it just gives a bit more flexibility than maybe Dev Robinson. I think Dev Robinson just needs to string together a few good games in the twos before he gets a look in again.
Yeah, well, he had a short pre-season. Al and I talked about that recently, and his form was a bit up and down, more down than up, and mainly because he had multiple surgeries. He wasn't really available for selection until a couple of days before our pre-season game against the Swans, from memory, or it might have been before our round 0 or opening round, whatever they call it, game.
It's a secret.
Shut up.
So yeah, he's had and look, the whole club's had a short preseason as it is.
Yes.
With the VFL team going deep into the VFL finals as well as the AFL team obviously making the grand final. And obviously Dev's had multiple surgeries with his injury on his wrist. So he's obviously needs, as you said, get some run in the legs. Look, Lyons is the sub, I don't mind. Even if Lyons came in for Bailey, I know it's not a like for like. We don't really lose anything defensively because Bailey's not really a defensive-minded player anyway.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea of Tunstall coming in. The guy's obviously playing great football. He's in good form. He's quick. And obviously we're going to need that because Geelong have surprisingly refreshed their midfield a bit with some young blood instead of guys our age. As they normally do, and also they have brought some guys back in this week, which I guess we'll get to. So they brought in Jake Kolodashny, a defender who's a pretty solid guy down back. Patrick Dangerfield is obviously not the 2016 Brownlow winning Patrick Dangerfield, but he's still pretty dangerous.
Yes.
Tom Hawkins, likewise, he's not the Tom Hawkins he was, but he's still extremely dangerous and still playing great footy. And Toby Conway, who's not really in the class of those guys. And they've omitted Shannon Neal, who had some pretty big raps on him after his game on the weekend, replacing Tom Hawkins. They've omitted Connor O'Sullivan and managed Zach Tui and Reece Stanley. So Chris Scott has a bit of a thing about managing his ruckman. I want to know which of his old Brisbane Lions teammates pissed him off in the rooms or on the training track to make him hate ruckman so much.
Yeah, Toby Conway is an interesting one. We've watched him with some interest on the Two Blokes Chatting radio show because my co-host, the other bloke chatting, Rob Cameron, is a mad Geelong supporter. And he's also quite attractive, I am told, by 20 and 21-year-old girls around town. So we've had a bit of an eye out for Toby to have a run. Reece Stanley just looked a bit short of a gallop when I saw him the other day in one of the games he played, and I thought it doesn't surprise me if you're going to leave somebody out. A trip to Brisbane when you're 6'8" probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So give Conway the run. It's not as though, I mean, Oscar McInerney, obviously a very good ruckman, but he's not Max Gawn or Brodie Grundy. So maybe they think they can give Toby an opportunity against Oscar and rove to Oscar as much the same way as what our guys did last week to Max Gawn.
Yeah, I mean, and look, there's been a lot of talk about Oscar McInerney's form being down, and it has been down. I felt the last 2 weeks he played a lot better, but he came up against Tristan Sherry, who is having a season out of the box, and then he came up against Max Gawn, who, I mean, Max Gawn is an amazing footballer. He kept Melbourne in it sort of in it last week, even though there was a stat that his hit outs to advantage weren't really on the high percentage side. So obviously our guys drove to him pretty well, much better than his own teammates did. But yeah, Reece Stanley seems to be a bit of a fall guy for the Cats a lot. Like he got left out of a final one year and they subsequently lost that game pretty comfortably. He seems to be in and out of the team. Zach Smith was another guy, huge mountain of a man that could never get a regular game down at the Cattery either. So, yeah, it's interesting, but I do agree with your theory on why they perhaps left him out. I guess, how do you see this game playing out?
Well, of all the teams that I dislike playing, Geelong is probably that team. And part of that was we're all a bit scarred from the last 10 years or so where they were generally beating us. We've obviously beaten them a couple of times in the interim. But the other thing, of course, you and I, for those who don't realise, both of us live in the beautiful city by the bay. And so therefore, if we win, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. We walk around like the proverbial peacock in town. If we lose, we spend most of the next 2 weeks under the bed because we don't want to be out on the streets because everyone knows who you follow. So that always worries me. I think the fact that it's in Brisbane, I think helps us enormously. Just watch me name drop here. I was talking to Andrew Buse during the week. He is my personal trainer, so don't let that. He's still very good. Despite
Busey's a great man. I bumped into him probably 4 or 5 years ago at a function, and he's another guy who looks like he could still play footy.
Oh, please don't tell him that. We'll never hear the end of it. He, of course, played for both sides, and I was talking to him last week, week before, maybe just before the Melbourne game, and we were talking about the fact that Brisbane had started slowly, and he said back when he was playing, both down here but also up in Brisbane as a Bear and a Lion, they would typically play 5 or 6 full-on games of football coming into round one.
Yeah. This
year, they had one muck around game where it went for 6 quarters, which I still haven't quite worked out why we didn't go for 6 sixths, but it went for 6 quarters. The second lot of 3 quarters involved predominantly reserves players. So if you were, say, I don't know, Brandon Starcevich, you might have played 3 quarters against Sydney. You then played 4 quarters against Gold Coast, and you're then expected to come up against the last year's preliminary finalist. Yes, we should have won that game. Yes, we were miles ahead. But he said, if you look at the 3 games in question, our very best was really good, and our really worst was shocking. If you think about it, we were beaten by 1 point by the last year's preliminary finalist. We were beaten by a team who was at the other end of the longest flight in Australian football, and the other one was we got beaten by the premiership team. So It wasn't that we were that far off, it's just that we weren't stringing it together. And his observation was that if you only play 2 or 3 games before the season starts, it's going to take a while for that consistency to come back. Now that it has come back, I'm not counting any chickens, and there's eggs in front of me, but no chickens at this point. I would like to think that Brisbane will win this by 3 or 4 goals, but you just can't tell. And that name, Hawkins, keeps popping up in front of me, which gives me nightmares as well a little bit.
Yeah, well, Hawkins is going to come up when I do my weird stat of the week.
Right.
Yeah, so I have like very similar thing. I think, and I said this last week when we played Melbourne. We're either going to win by a lot. Oh, sorry, we're going to win by a little or lose by a lot.
Yep.
Based on history, not based on what I feel in my
Yep.
gut. And Geelong are that danger team. No matter where they are on the ladder, you're always scared of them because they've got so many guns.
Yes.
And for a side that's never bottomed out, never had a lot of early draft picks, they always seem to just be able to get guys to come through. But you look at the Geelong lineup, and it's just got guns on every line. I mean, obviously we know how good Tom Stewart is because everyone in the media keeps telling us. And you and I I definitely saw a bit of him before he went to the Cats, and thought he was pretty good back then as well. But
Yep.
you look, he's not the only one. I mean, Zach Guthrie's become a really good player.
Which is not bad for a bloke who's 13.
Yeah, he looks it, doesn't he? But he's the tallest 13-year-old I've ever seen.
Yeah. But very old.
Yeah, and if they can afford to leave guys like Reece Stanley and Zach Tui out, who I guess are ruckman and a backline player, but then you look at the midfield. I mean, like they're undefeated, and Dangerfield's barely played. Mitch Duncan's not playing his best footy. He's been serviceable. And even like Tom Hawkins has been serviceable. Jeremy Cameron's starting to come into it a bit, which, the whole is he the best player in the conversations have started again, which is kind of boring because in 2 weeks when he doesn't do anything against us and whoever they play in that game, they'll forget about him. But yeah, they got guns everywhere, and they do lift when they're playing us, I feel.
Yep.
And we've had some really like a couple of games at Cardinia Park that have been around about the 10 points or less margin. Obviously, the Zach Bailey Blitzarves game, which in hindsight we should have won, but shit happens. We didn't. The last game we played at Cardinia Park, you can tell on the local I call it Cardinia Park, not the Health Fund Stadium.
That's right.
Yeah, with all those pushes in the back that Hawkins got away with, and obviously the game with Lincoln McCarthy where he took that big mark and kicked the goal to win the game. So there's been some really close games. There's been some floggings as well, which we've copped most of.
Yes, and I've really loved giving them a flogging. Maybe this is the week.
Yeah, like I was saying to Al, I'm pretty sure we beat them by around about 30 or 40 points one game at the Gabba a couple of years back. We probably should have beaten them by a lot more last year at the Gabba as well, but we did what we do and we put the cue in the rack a little bit too early.
Yes.
And I guess I always go back to that unfortunate day of 2013. Not the good result, the one that happened down here in Geelong, where Ryan Lester could have been a hero, but unluckily wasn't.
Yes.
And unfortunately, Paul Chapman got to be the hero.
Yes, I was there that day. My first visit to, and again, you'll notice we call it Cardinia Park and not Cardinia Park like they do on TV. My first visit to Cardinia Park was in 1972. It's the first time I'd been to Geelong. And we came down and watched a young fella playing his 300th game, a guy called Kevin Murray. And
I think I've heard of him.
Absolutely flogged. It was a show. I mean, 1972, you can remember how good Fitzroy were in those days. So, well, you don't remember, obviously. But
no, well, I wasn't even born.
Yeah, thank you. I picked that up. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I mentioned to Al and Jules about a week ago that Kevin Murray retired the year before I was born. And Al thought he retired 30 years ago, so I was feeling reasonably flattered by that. But no.
He played the 1974 season, then was captain coach of Sandringham in 1975 and 76.
There you go. Well, I am much closer to 50 than I am to 30. Let's just say that much.
Yeah, as I am. I'm much closer to 50 than I am to 30 by about 20 years.
Yeah, so I guess, look, I'm tipping us by 12 points.
Yep.
I think it's not going to be one of the big forwards that kicks the goals. I think it's going to be one of the smaller forwards or maybe a midfielder that gets 4. Maybe 3 or 4.
Will it be if Charlie Cameron's goal return is the same as the margin in the game?
Yeah, look, that could possibly happen. It was pretty close
My mate
last week,
Benny
wasn't it?
Waterworth can go to town then, can't he?
Oh, yeah, with numerology.
Hello, Benny, if you're listening.
Yeah, I should. I'll slide into his DMs and send him a link. Listen to this episode.
Yeah.
But, yeah, yeah. I think it's going to be close all the way through the game, and it's going to be one of those heart stoppers, in my opinion. And I do think we have the firepower down back. And our defensive group have shown in recent games, in fact, for most of this year, probably except for the Freo game and one quarter against Carlton, that they are strong. Yes. Obviously, Dale Morris is doing a pretty good job now that he's settled in to his role and the boys are settled into his style of playing football. And, I guess they had that 1 year with Jed last year, and then suddenly they got a new guy. So it took them a game or two to get into the swing. But I feel like last week, I think Al brought up that we had the second lowest score against last week.
Okay.
Hawthorn. So Gold Coast kept Hawthorn to under 60. We conceded 60. Freo conceded 66, 68 maybe. They're about 65, something like that.
Yep.
It's good to see Port Adelaide kick a low score too. Yeah. Although I have tipped Port Adelaide to win. I've kind of gone with them as the lesser of two evils at the moment, playing Collingwood.
Well, Charlie Dixon is missing, so he's being managed. So that might be the dynamic.
Charlie Dixon's been missing for a few years, let's face it.
I meant missing the game, but yes, I take your point.
Oh, look, I thought that was interesting after last week's game. He came out in an interview and basically said that he got towed up by his opponent, Alex Pearce from the Dockers. I thought that's not something you hear very often. But I guess I've watched a lot of Charlie Dixon's motoring YouTube channel where he does do a lot of drag racing and interviewing a lot of guys with nice cars. He seems pretty humble, so that doesn't surprise me. But that he was honest enough. But it surprises me that an AFL footballer would come out immediately after a game and say, "Yeah, the other bloke just towed me up."
Yeah,
not too sure how Kenny Hinkley would have copped that, or David Koch.
Well, I'm assuming at some stage Luke Ryan came on and Pearce off.
Yeah, well, Pearce ended up, I think, down forward late in the game too, which is interesting.
Yes, I could tell you a story about Luke Ryan from his VFL days, but since you told me no F words and C words, we'll leave that one out of this conversation, but I'll tell you later.
Yeah, that might be one for well, we don't have a Patreon, so yeah, that might be one for YouTube don't even let you drop any F-bombs anymore either.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So I guess my little weird stat that I think is going to happen a lot this weekend is commentators mentioning that Tom Hawkins is going to monster the opposition ruckman in forward line ruck contests. I reckon I've heard that more times than days I've been alive.
Not as many times as Joel Patfull being a best and fairest winner at the Brisbane Lions. That was Dwayne Russell's only stat one year.
Yes, good old Dwayne Russell is still likes to speak in one word sentence. So this is a bit of an off topic. There's a bit of media about young Harley Reid, the number one draft pick over at the Eagles, and how he's now got a girlfriend.
Okay.
Except she's a member of the Dersma family. And I think she's going to be playing for Port Adelaide in the AFLW. I could be completely wrong on that. But
I think there is one of the girls, the Dersma girls, playing there.
Yeah, and obviously there's the two brothers currently playing in the AFL at different clubs. So yeah, there's fingers in pies everywhere with that family, and it'll be interesting to see if in a year or two's time Port Adelaide try and get their claws on the Harley Reid. I hope he stays at the Eagles, because you do want to see I guess some of those clubs come back up from the bottom and see if there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel like we had a few years back.
Yes, absolutely agree.
And that young fella's playing some really good football in the last few weeks too.
Yes, he looks like he can play a bit.
All right. So, if you got any, I guess, getting back to our game, any predictions on any players that might jump out? Any things that might happen of interest?
No, I think the interesting thing in my mind is going to be who's going to go to the boy Cameron.
Yep.
And I suspect since Zach Tui's out, see the way I did that? You thought I was talking about Jeremy, didn't you? I think Colin Jasny will go to Charlie Cameron. I wouldn't be at all surprised, depending upon how mobile he gets. I think Starcevich will get first crack at him. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if Darcy Gardner heads back to play on him at some stage during the game.
Yeah, look, he's done a job on a lot of really good mobile key forwards over the year. A bit of a suggestion as well, actually by the guys on the Raw Deal, that they thought that maybe Leicester might have first go.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I think he's mobile enough, he's quick enough, and he has that phrase that everybody loves to use. He can play tall or small.
Yes. In many ways, the same as Joel Patford used to.
Yeah, and there's even like they said it about Lincoln McCarthy, that like if he plays small, he's playing really small.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just downing a drink of water while we.
That's all right.
While we chat away.
That's okay. Go for it. I've got through a bottle of water myself.
Yeah, with a little bit of flavour in it.
Indeed, correct.
Yeah, but I think Jeremy Cameron's the key, but as well, Tom Hawkins. Well, our boys have beaten Hawkins before, but he's also gotten a hold of us plenty of times as well.
Yeah, I'd be sending Jack Payne to him in the first instance. Got the size, keeps Andrews a little bit more available to sort of float a bit.
Yeah, well, that's what Payne does. I think he's a gorilla who takes the other gorilla on the opposition team and allows Andrews to be a bit more mobile, get from contest to contest, not get caught up in wrestles, because clearly that's not his thing. Whereas Payne has the strength, I think, and the size, the bulk size to go with Hawkins. And I don't know if you've ever stood next to Tom Hawkins, but he is a massive mountain of a man.
Unit, yes.
I mean, he's one of the most docile, placid guys off the footy field that you'll ever meet, but he is huge guy with white line fever on the footy field.
Yes.
And we've got to respect him because, like I said, he has gotten hold of us a lot of times over the years. Hopefully that does not continue.
Yeah, so hopefully that's over and done with.
Yeah, but yes, well, hopefully also the crowd turn out for the game as well. And we haven't won a game at the Gabba yet this year, but I'm hoping that doesn't deter the Queenslanders from showing up and making some noise. I don't think there's going to be a huge Geelong contingent there like we had with the Collingwood and Carlton games.
Yeah, I almost got on a plane and went up, but I've got a family commitment. But otherwise, I would have been there myself. Yeah, I usually get up there once a year. The added bonus, had we been able to get up this week, is my partner barracks for Geelong, so that might have made for an interesting conversation. I've only ever been to the football with her once, and I think the expression "I'm never going to the football with you ever again, you're so biased" was levelled at me, and I think that's
well, I mean, why wouldn't you be biased towards your own team?
Yeah, I think the fact that I was one of about 15 Brisbane Lions supporters in a packed GMHBA stadium, brackets Cardinia Park, may have been a dangerous ploy. But nonetheless, you give it a crack, don't you?
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, you're not going there to cheer on the opposition, are you? Like, they're not going to be cheering on your team.
You're going to come out alive. That's part of the deal.
Well, it's interesting because I've always had pretty good crowd experiences at Cardinia Park. Even so, the famous Blitzarves Bailey game, walking out, I had a lot of Cat supporters coming up and saying to me, "You guys are robbed. You deserve to win. That was wrong that you didn't get that free kick." And even people come up to me at a servo the next day. I was still wearing my polo shirt and saying, "Oh yeah, you guys were robbed last night." So I find Cats fans, the ones who go to the footy, are pretty good.
Yeah,
but you can pick the ones who don't go to the footy because they are clueless and they don't realise it. And they
away with clueless people.
They just what is that's correct. They ramble on about stuff that they have no idea about. And I mean, I'm never going to claim to be an expert on AFL football, but yeah, you can pick those people up pretty quickly. And they're the ones that are just, oh, yeah, you're going to lose because you're shit.
Yeah.
And it's not, because we've got this guy and that guy can do this. And our coaches.
You don't want to get into analysis and bring facts into it. I mean, next you'll bring statistics in it, and then where will we be?
Yeah, well, statistics are an interesting thing. Like some of these young halfbackers getting around these days that are getting 30 plus and having zero influence on the actual outcome of the game. We don't have any of those guys anymore, but we're actually pretty low.
Sorry, I just sneezed there for a moment. There it is again.
Yeah, Harry Sheasel. And look, Harry Sheasel seems like a pretty good bloke too, pretty level-headed. But yeah, we're also not allowed to say the D word on this podcast. It's banned.
Oh, okay.
Yes. It's a fine if you drop the word in conversation, but you sneezed it, so we'll let you off.
Yeah, no, I was just had something up my nose. Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, I guess that about wraps it up. And I reckon we've got a couple little outtakes that I might chop out and post them up on YouTube on their own, particularly about the local footy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll probably get you back on when we've got Al back on board.
Sure.
Another time. We do have a lot of fun having our guests on. We as you would know by now, we had Jules Schulte on last week.
Yep.
And she's lovely. And we had another friend of ours who's a good line supporter, Deborah Smith, a couple of weeks ago. And she loved it, enjoyed the experience, and she's travelled the last game and travelling again to the Anzac game. So we're going to get her on after that.
Nice. If I think of it, I'll have a chat to Busey and see if he's up for a chat.
Yeah, no, Busey would be great. And that actually, it would have been interesting to have him on this week with the connection to both clubs. But yeah. And just for the listeners out there as well, I want to say thank you to everybody for all your support. We've just on Spotify alone, which accounts for under 40% of our total listenership, we've smashed through the 5,000 listener mark now. And we've only really been doing this since the start of this football season. And Al's only really come on board since the second game. So I guess the third week of the season. And Apple Podcasts, which is around about 50% of our listenership, is obviously a lot more than that. And iHeartRadio not going as well, which I don't think too many people in this country use that app. But yeah, so the Spotify and Apple Podcast listens have been great. The support, I'm getting a lot of feedback now as well. Again, as I keep saying, most of it's telling me that I should do this better and I should do that, and they just love how polished Al is and they love all the guests. So you got to take the hits for the team, don't you?
Absolutely. It's all part of the fun. But
yeah.
Keep going. Keep having a crack.
Yeah, and if you just want to give another plug to your show as well, just before we wrap up.
Yep. The show is called the Two Blokes Chatting Radio Show. It's on 94.7 The Pulse here in Geelong on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. Oh, I went all radio on you. You can find out everything you need to know at .2bc, the number 2bc.radio. You can find us on Facebook. We've got a YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel, surprisingly, is Two Blokes Chatting. And if you go on there, I can guarantee that you will find a conversation with a chap called Nigel Lappin recorded on the way to the grand final last year, for example.
Oh, outstanding. Make sure you get on and listen to that, and throw a bit of support behind Neil, and I forget your co-host's name.
He's not important. His name is Rob.
There you go. He goes for Geelong, so we don't care about him temporarily. And
Correct.
I also have a family history podcast called Reaching for My Roots, and I have an episode coming out in the next fortnight, which actually talks about some members of my family and my ex-wife's family who played in the old VFL competition, including one absolute champion of the game who unfortunately played for Collingwood, not for the Fitzroy Club.
No good.
Yeah, but beggars can't be choosers. He's not in my family; he's on the other side. So, all right. Well, thanks for coming on, Neil. And
thanks for the invite. Hope that was not too much waffle.
Oh, look, the more waffle, the better. That's what sets us aside from everybody else. We don't come on claiming to be experts on football. We're just a couple of fans of the Brisbane Lions and football in general. and waffling on and going on tangents is what we do, and seems to be what everybody who listens loves. We have not had any negative feedback about that aspect, so that's a great part. And
that'll change this week. We have two slogans that we run with on the Two Blokes Chatting radio show. One comes from our mate Ian Cover, who says, "Growing old is inevitable. Growing up is optional."
Correct.
And the second one is, "Why rehearse? Why prepare when you can present crap like we do on a regular basis?" And of course, everyone's entitled to my opinion. That's the other option as well.
Yep. We've the previous guests have all said, "Oh, I apologise on going on a little bit here," and it's always no. That's what we do here.
That's it. It's all about filling time.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for coming on, and
thanks for the invite. Chat again.
No worries, and have a good rest of your night, the rest of your week, and yeah, go Lions.
All right. Chat soon.
No worries. Thanks, Neil.
Catch
you, mate. See ya.
Bye.